It's the Baaaaahbra Show, coming your way with a smile today, down the humorous path with a lark and a laugh. It's the Baaaaahbra Show. The Baaaaahbra, the Baaaaahbra, the Baaaaahbra Show. Welcome to Humorous Adventures with Barbara.
Well, welcome again to the Humorous Adventures with Barbara. I would like to continue with Growing Up Gross, the preteen years. Here's a story about the first puppy that I ever got who became my best friend. His name was Pecos, and I'll tell you why. But first off, before we went to pick out a little puppy, my father told me, he said, we're going to go to the dog pound because there are puppies there that if they don't get adopted in a certain amount of time, they won't be on this earth very long. So we're going to adopt one of them. And I said, okay. And I am so excited. It's the day to go to pick out my puppy. And as I go in, I look at each of the cages, and I'm looking, and then it happened. You know when that happens, when you find the one that you fall in love with, love at first sight. I saw him, I knew he was it. So now I'm very excited. I have my new puppy and I'm holding him in my arms. And when we get to take him home, of course, the first thing we have to do is name him. My brother came up with the idea that we should call him Sergeant. And I said, why Sergeant? And he said, because he's always on duty. Get it? So that was pretty funny. But since my brother was also taking Spanish at the time, he said, you know, why don't we call him Pecos? Because that's Spanish for sergeant. So Pecos it was. Now I have my new little puppy, Pecos. And he was very smart. We taught him all sorts of tricks, how to get the handkerchief. My father would fool around, pretend that he could play the violin. Anyway, he was really smart. And at the time, growing up in my neighborhood, there was no leash law. So Pecos was free to frolic outside. And it just so happened that where we lived was this huge field, nothing around. And Pecos would go out there for hours frolicking with all his other puppy friends. But every once in a while, he would come home, and before he came in the house, he went like that. And you know why he went like this? Because for whatever reason, and it's got to be a thing about dogs, somehow he would find a dead fish in the field, and he would just get in that dead fish and just roll around in it. And then, so when he came home, he stunk. So the reason he would be like this is he knew he had to get a bath. And I would say to him, Pecos, we've talked about this. Why do you do this? You know you hate taking a bath. You know I hate giving you a bath. This is him. And the reason why I hated to give him a bath is I had to take him down to our cellar that wasn't really remodeled. Is where the washer and dryer were. It wasn't a fun place. It was dark down there. I would have to put him in a big bucket, and then I'd get all the water and suds on him, and then he would just do this and get it all over me. I was taking a stinky bath while he was as well. Anyway, I loved the guy. He was my puppy. This is what we did. So also, you know, he could sleep in my room, and we would, before I would go to bed or, you know, whenever, we would have these serious conversations. He'd be real intent looking at me. Now, okay, maybe these conversations were a little one way, but I knew He understood everything I was saying. Now, when it came time to eat, we didn't really like that canned dog food. It stunk. You know, you had to open up the can. Pooh. So we found this like dried, moist dog food, and it was called Prime Variety. And it came in 3 flavors: liver, chicken, and beef. Well, I like chicken and beef, but I hate liver. So before I would give him the liver, I would say, Pecos, it's liver, it's liver. And the reason I was doing this to get him so excited is because I hate liver. So I would get him so excited, put the food in the bowl, and he'd eat it right up. And I'd say, gotcha. Like, I pulled a fast one on him. But I think the joke is on me because, you know, I never tasted that food. And maybe it really tasted the same, whether it was liver, chicken, or beef. But for the humans, they dyed it. So they made the chicken look a little blonder and the beef, you know, a little brown, and the liver even a dark brown. Now, another thing I wanted to do for my puppy, you know, living in Boston, it got cold in the winter, and I had taken up knitting for a while. And I thought, I'm going to make him a sweater so he's really warm in the wintertime. I put my heart and soul in this sweater. Knit, 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 knit. I even made a little hat and booties. I thought it was fabulous. And as I'm knitting it, I'm just so excited. I'm telling him all about it. The day came for me to put the sweater on him, and he's fighting me. He hated it. And I'm like, come on, put it on. And then I finally get it on him, and he's just like this. Oh, he hated the sweater. He kept ripping at it. Finally, I gave up. I said, okay, I know you hate it. I ended up giving it to my cousin Bobby, who had a dog in Michigan, and his name was Caliban. And Caliban loved the sweater. So, you know, there's really no accounting for taste. That's all I can say. I'm glad Caliban loved it. Now, one day, I'm talking on the phone with my friends, and Pecos comes in the room, and he's choking. He's going, I'm so excited. Well, I know what happened. He had to have gotten in the garbage somehow, and he got a chicken bone stuck. So I said to my friend, I gotta go. My dog's choking. I gotta go to the vet. As he's choking, I get him in the car. I am frantically driving, and I finally get to the vet. And as we're running up to the door, I see a big sign on the vet's door. Sorry, we are closed today for worming. I'm like, I start banging on the door. Let me in, let me in. So one of the people in the waiting room opens the door. What's going on? I said, my dog's choking. Pecos runs in. There were all these dogs and cats in there waiting to be wormed or whatever. Pecos is now running up and down the waiting room going, hoo! Whoo! And I'm beside myself. I don't know what to do because my dog could die any moment. He's been choking now since I left the house. Whoo! Whoo! The doctor comes out. He's like, what is going on in here? I go, my dog is choking. And instead of looking at him right away, he said, I will be with him in a minute. And he goes back into his room, continuing worming something. And my dog is like, oh, oh. And then all of a sudden, from way back at the end of the waiting room, he did one big, oh, and the chicken bone flew across the room. And then Pecos was like, all right, like nothing happened. And I'm like, okay, great. I guess we can leave now. Right about then, the doctor comes out. He goes, where do you think you're going? I said, well, he's fine now. He popped out the chicken bone. He goes, oh no, he's coming in. I guess the doctor wanted me to pay for it. But, you know, I didn't care because Pecos was priceless to me. And that's all I cared about, that he was okay. Now, not only did I have Pecos, but I just have to mention some other little pets we had that were kind of unusual, or things that were happening. My father one day was driving on the highway, and he looks and he sees there's a huge land turtle walking on the road. So he pulls over, he gets the turtle, about yay big, brings him home, and we called him Claude for I don't know what reason. We put Claude in a big rubber tub in the kitchen, and we really didn't know what to feed him. And as my mother was cooking hamburgers, she'd like throw Claude some raw hamburger. He seemed to like it. But also, my job was to go to our smelly garbage pail with a fly swatter to collect flies for Claude. Again, a job I didn't like, but I love Claude, so I did my due diligence. And I would swat flies and bring them home. That was a delicacy. But then I started thinking Claude might be a little lonely. So I went down to the Five and Dime downtown, and they had a whole bunch of little turtles like that. I think you've seen them. And I thought, I'm going to give Claude a friend. And I bought one of those, brought him home, and we called him Little Claude. So Little Claude could ride on Big Claude's back. But, you know, again, we didn't really know what the diet was for a turtle at that time. And I think Claude and Little Claude died of an overdose of hamburger, unfortunately. We had some birds, and sometimes when my father was cleaning the cage, the bird flew out twice. One behind the refrigerator, and another time he just flew out the window. And neighbors called up and said, "There's a pretty yellow bird in the yard." Well, that was our canary. Now, I know maybe not a lot of people have stories about alligators, but I do. Two stories. One story is on a business trip, I was golfing, not that I know how to golf, but I hit the ball near a tree, near a log, and I thought, well, I'll just go get it when it's my next shot. And it turned out to be an alligator that like took off, and I was really frightened. Another time in Florida, I was at an animal farm with all my relatives, and I happened to be walking near my Uncle Eddie, who's 80 years old. But I said to the guide, I said, you know, these alligators are just walking right around us. Why shouldn't I be afraid that they wouldn't want to take a bite of my leg or something? And the guide said to me, he goes, well, you just need to make sure that you're not the slowest one in your party. And I looked at my Uncle Eddie, and I go, Eddie, I'm sticking with you. So I would just like to say thank you for joining me on the humorous adventures of Barbara. To be continued.
It's the Baaaaahbra Show. It's the Baaaaahbra Show. Coming your way with a smile today. Down the humorous path with a lark and a laugh. It's the Baaaaahbra Show. The